Hey, what's up everyone? Mark Joy here. In today's live video, we're going to be going over the avionics installation process, and that includes installation of new systems, upgrades, and installing wiring in even brand spanking new aircraft. So let's get into it. A quick overview of this tutorial. We're going to be going over project preparation, bench work, installation of the wiring in the aircraft, function testing, overall system checkout, closing up the aircraft, and returning it to service. Project preparation first here. The first thing that I want to call out is that the general approach to this the preparation phase is that you should get as far ahead as you can before the aircraft arrives. Just make sure that all of your ducks are in a row. I think that's one of my favorite sayings, get the ducks in the row. But yeah, just make sure that as much of the pre-planning that can be done, make sure that that's done before the aircraft arrives, just so you don't get behind on your project. But the first thing is a documentation review, where you'll review all of the installation instructions that are involved with the avionics installation, and that could include STC, supplemental type certificate, service bulletin or SB, or anything else really that's involved with the installation. So that could also be manufacturer instructions. And those will generally come with wiring diagrams and any structural blueprints that are required to create things like racks, shelves that the LRUs might go on, or any modifications to instrument panels that are required. And then last here we have parts lists, so the type of wiring that's going to be required, and any connectors, line replaceable units, and really any other parts that are required for the installation. The next thing would be aircraft familiarization. So you want to review a general layout of your aircraft to understand where the components are going to be located, and if there is guidance from your documentation, which there should be. You just want to understand where everything is going to be located, just to have a good understanding of the project, and just generally where everything is going to be being laid in. So also want to identify any locations of parts that are going to be affected by the installation or upgrade. And so yeah, really just getting familiar with the aircraft that you're working on, especially if it's something new that you've never worked on. Next, you want to gather up all of your parts. You want to make sure that you order all of the required parts with enough lead time before the aircraft arrives, so that you're not stuck waiting for parts. And make sure especially that all of the revision levels are correct per the aircraft's serial number. And you're going to want to check the compliance. So maybe there's a camp system or something that is going to show just sort of all of the different things that the aircraft has complied with in general. If you want to look up camp, it's an acronym. I'm forgetting what it stands for. But basically is just an electronic system that shows kind of like all of the maintenance that your aircraft has been kind of complied with, and like all of the parts that are installed on the aircraft and so forth. So once you receive all of your parts, you're going to go through and inventory all of them to make sure that you have everything that you asked for in your order for the upgrade. And if anything is missing or out of order, you can make sure to address that before the aircraft arrives. And address that with the manufacturer wherever you're ordering the parts from. And then another kind of tip here that you can do to kind of keep yourself really organized is to sort parts that kind of go together. So that could mean putting like different parts of a connector that maybe came separately, maybe putting them in the same bag that go with a connector assembly. Or any sort of LRUs that kind of you can group together. So sorting the parts out and just coming up with like a good system so that everything is very organized for the installation or upgrade. Next, let's talk about bench work. Got a picture here of what sort of mock-ups will look like for different installation setups. So everything kind of gets laid out as sort of as it would in the aircraft. So this is just kind of a picture of different boards that have wiring harnesses laid out on them. All right, so bench work goals and activities. You're going to want to create a routing plan for the harness that's going to be going into the aircraft. So you're going to need to determine the lengths of the wires, and this may need to be done after the aircraft arrives, but ideally you'll be able to do it in some form or fashion before the aircraft arrives, just to get sort of a rough estimate of the lengths of cabling. And generally speaking, the cabling is pretty cheap compared to the other components of the aircraft, like the LRUs or computers. So some amount of the wiring will be cut and thrown away, but you don't want to overdo it either. So you don't want to be really wasteful with your wiring, because theoretically you could just say every wire that's going into this harness needs to be, I don't know, 10 times longer than you think it should be, and you'll just be wasting wiring. So just something to consider when you're sort of determining your wire lengths. All right, next you can create a mock-up route on tables or boards. And so what you're going to kind of try to do is sort of tape up, or you can maybe even draw out all of the different places that the wiring is going to touch in the aircraft. And so kind of visualize laying that out on a flat surface. And you can make measurements, and it's just sort of like a way to do as much building as you can before the aircraft arrives, and so that you're not actually in the aircraft crouched down doing sort of the work that is unnecessary to be done in the aircraft, just to kind of make things more comfortable for the technicians. So after that's kind of set up, you're going to want to print all of the wire labeling, and there are a lot of different variations of this, but there are machines that can print wire labels on the wire. So it can be maybe every 6 inches or so, a wire number will get stamped on the wiring, and all of that is based on the wiring diagrams, where there will be labels for each wire in the entire harness. And so you're going to build up, after the wires are printed, you're going to start building up your harness, where on your mock-up board, you're going to lay out all of the different wires onto the board. And some boards will have like little clamps that hold the wire in place, and lots of different variations on that. But you're going to start building up the harness and laying the wires in. And then you're going to do an inventory of all of those wires against the wiring diagram that you're using for the project, just to make sure that you have everything, because it's really a pain to have to add in a new wire after the harness is installed in the aircraft. So you just want to make sure that you have everything before you start tying things up, and before you put the wiring in the aircraft. All right, next you're going to tie up the harness. And so really that's just securing everything together. And on the right here, you can see this is a mock-up. So you can see they have this like purple tape laid out, and you can see these connector numbers, or termination point numbers, where it's like the labeling of each connector, and that's going to be given to you in a wiring diagram. So you can see this is kind of a smaller, simple harness, but you can see how all of the wires are bundled together. And what you'll also do is sort of comb out the bundle. So you're going to make sure that the wires are all running as neatly as they can in parallel to each other. So you can see how this section of the bundle, everything is kind of neat and tidy. And you've got these ties that are being placed on the harness every so often. And if you check my channel, I've got in this series actually a bit about building up wiring harnesses and connectors. So check this series of videos in the playlist for that information. I did that in previous videos. But anyway, you can see, like I mentioned, looks like they're using tape here or colored lines to kind of show how the harness kind of maps out. And they have these little, looks like little pins or studs that kind of hold the wires in place around the table. So this is kind of just like a simple example of what the mock-up table looks like. Right, and then speaking to doing as much work as you can on the front end, you can also go ahead and make terminations of the wiring. So termination means at the end point of the wiring, you're going to be putting a connector or any sort of like device that's going to be connected to maybe ground or some other component. So the termination point, it just means the end point of the different sections of the harness. I'm not sure why they chose the word terminate. Sounds kind of violent, but that's the sort of like the term that's used in avionics, terminations or terminate. All right, and then next up, any structures work that needs to be done. Racks, like I mentioned, racks or shelves, or if there are maybe large changes to the instrument panel, like a brand new instrument panel, for example, all that work can be done up before, and any structures or parts that need to be fabricated, that can all be done as well during this sort of pre-aircraft arrival phase, if you will. Okay, so next section here, aircraft installation. So when the aircraft arrives, you're going to have to gain access to all the different places that the wiring needs to be installed in. And so that's going to be removing any necessary interior parts or exterior parts for that matter. So that could be panels or seats, instruments from the instrument panel, and any line replaceable units, which are the black boxes. So you can kind of see our technicians are here. It looks like they're working on the headliner. The headliner is this piece right here, but yeah, this is kind of an example of a corporate type jet where they have everything accessed. The seats are removed, carpets removed, and these side panels are removed. So just to get access to all of the wiring, and you can kind of see sort of blurry one of the wire bundles in this aircraft back here, but this is kind of what it looks like inside. Next, you're going to take the wiring harness out into the aircraft and install it. So you're going to verify all of the routes that you chose before you start installing the wiring in the aircraft. So maybe take some measurements just to make sure that everything can fit where it needs to go, because you definitely don't want to come up short. But it can vary depending on each project, whether you have like a really good handle on the different lengths of the wiring, and so it just kind of depends on the project. So you may not have the actual lengths of the wires until the aircraft arrives and you go out and actually put a tape measure in there. So I guess going back to what I was saying about doing the work up front, if that's more of like in the case of where you can reproduce the work, or you have like gone out and you're doing a repetitive installation or upgrade, and you only need to take the measurements once, and you've got them to put on the mock-up board. So sorry if I confused anyone about that. So anyway, if there are more efficient routes that you kind of discover as you have gained access to the aircraft, you can take some time to readjust where the routes were that you had planned for. And then finally, you're going to start routing the harness throughout the aircraft to all of the different components and locations where they need to go. So over here on the right, you can see how all of the wiring harness here is installed in the aircraft and is finally secured through ADEL clamps here and or cushion clamps. And you can see again all of the different tie points that have been installed here to just like create the wire bundles. This looks like chaos to me, but it just sort of is what it is, and just make sure that you're routing everything in accordance with the documentation that you're using. But I'm not saying anything is wrong with the routing, but it just looks like chaos to me. So anyway, after everything's secured, any sort of structural work can also be done in parallel if that's necessary. So say if you have to get in and cut holes in an instrument panel, or maybe drill holes in the airframe rather, to maybe mount some of these tie points or securement points, that can be done in parallel as the wiring begins going in. And then once the wiring is all secured in the aircraft, you're going to finish any remaining terminations that need to be done that you couldn't do beforehand. And so over here on the right, I've got a picture of what some cables look like with the pins on them. And in previous videos, or a previous video here on electrical connectors, I've got a lot of details on how electrical connectors kind of go together in the different parts and pieces. But this is just sort of what the termination looks like with the pins on the wiring after everything has been stripped back and crimped onto the wires. And so after the termination is finished and the connectors are installed onto the pins are installed into the connectors, so the connectors are all put together, you can install all of the back shells, and then finally install the connectors to racks if you have like rack mounted connectors, and secure any connectors to structures where it's necessary. So say if you had a bulkhead connector, you could mount that up to the airframe. And so we're just making sure that everything is kind of going together, and we're approaching the next steps. And the next steps are function testing and troubleshooting. So after all of the connectors are assembled, we're going to do continuity testing. So that's basically a point-to-point test with a multimeter using the ohmmeter setting to make sure that all of the connectors were assembled correctly, make sure that all of the pins were put into the correct location on each connector. So you're going to go through every single wire that was in the wiring diagram and make sure that everything is as it should, because we don't want to just blindly start connecting things and turning power on, because that can start a fire. So we don't want to start fires. So separate from continuity testing is also power testing. So after you verify that all of the wires are in the right place in the connectors, you'll finally turn power on and check any connector where power is going to and make sure that the voltage is correct. So just making sure that you didn't put a wire, connect a wire to, say, a circuit breaker that was on the wrong bus, or had the wrong voltage, or maybe alternating current where you should have had DC current. So power test just to make sure that again, you're not going to start a fire or blow anything up. And so throughout the entire process, if you find any issues, you can disassemble the connectors and remove the pins from the connector and put them where they're supposed to go as you find any errors that you've made. So that's kind of the wiring checkout process. And our person over here, it looks like someone possibly working on an aircraft carrier. You can see their multimeter is propped up here, and looks like they've got a set of drawings or wiring diagrams, and they have the connector in their hand, and they're doing some wiring checkout. So after all the wiring is checked out, all of the components will get installed. So that would be any LRUs that were removed for access. Those get installed, and then also any new components, those would get installed as well, at least hooked up to the system. Connect any connectors. So if there were disconnects, make sure that those are hooked up. So we're basically just connecting everything to the system, making sure everything is hooked up, and then we're going to perform the function testing per the documentation. So that could be the maintenance manual for any existing components that were removed, and then if there are specific function tests that are required by the documentation that has come with the installation. So again, if it's a supplemental type certificate or a service bulletin, those will usually come with some sort of specific function testing that needs to be done. And it may be something as simple as saying, do function test XYZ from the maintenance manual, and that's Bob's your uncle. So you're going to do all of the function tests and make sure that everything is in working order, and note any discrepancies, and do the necessary troubleshooting to resolve any discrepancies that you find. So that could be things like having to reseat connectors, or power cycling, or maybe even though you did the continuity testing, hopefully all of the wiring is where it should be, but mistakes do happen. And so, excuse me, if something was mispinned, you want to take care of that. So a lot of different things can go wrong. I won't get too far into any sort of any troubleshooting in this presentation, but that's kind of what the process for troubleshooting and checkout looks like. Okay, so return to service. After all the function testing is complete, you're going to install any components that were removed for access. And if there are any cases where you're installing components that were removed for access that still need a function test, you're going to do that. So the previous section that I have up here is mainly directed at any changes that you've made due to the installation of the avionics, or modification, or project in general. So that's mainly what this section was directed at. But yeah, complete any remaining function tests if necessary, and then if you had to route wiring through a bung, through a hole in the airframe, that would get sealed up with like a Pro Seal or some sort of weatherproof sealant, weatherproof and pressure proof. sealant just to make sure that everything is closed up. So again, the seats, floor panels, access panels, anything else that we removed at the beginning of the process is going to get reinstalled. All right, and then finally, after the project is finished, everything is tested, the person who is overseeing the work is going to make a logbook entry in the aircraft logbook just to state that the work was completed and all of the systems are functional and the aircraft is in an airworthy state. So this is just sort of the cherry on top after all of the work is finished. And then we're finally going to watch the aircraft fly away. Okay, so to wrap this one up, amazingly, I went a bit short. Usually these end up being about 45 minutes or so. So a little bit short on this one, but just to wrap things up here, all of the different things that we went over. So to start things off, you're going to do project preparation, which includes some document review, gathering all of your parts and pieces, and doing some aircraft familiarization, especially if you are completely unfamiliar with the aircraft that's coming in to have the avionics upgrade or installation or avionics project. You're going to be doing bench work if it's possible. Like I said earlier in today's presentation, if you're doing sort of like a repetitive installation or mod, a large amount of the work can be done on a bench because you've taken the measurements and you sort of have created a repeatable sort of assembly-like process. So you're going to create a routing plan, build up the harness, and do any terminations that you can beforehand. And then next, you're going to install the harness in the aircraft. So you're going to gain access, remove seats, panels, etc. And then finally route the harness inside of the aircraft and secure it, and then do any remaining terminations. After all of the wiring is installed, you're going to do function testing and troubleshooting. So that includes wiring checkout with continuity testing and power checks. And then finally connecting everything up and doing function tests and any troubleshooting that's required if anything fails the function testing. After all that's complete, to finish everything up, you're going to return the aircraft to service. So installing any items that were removed for access and any sort of outlying function tests. So maybe there was a light on a panel that you needed to check or something like that. And finish up the paperwork and do your return to service sign off saying that the aircraft is in an airworthy state, and watch the aircraft fly away, clap your hands, do a cartwheel, whatever gets you going. All right, that's all for today. Thanks everyone for checking out this video. Hope it was helpful. Yeah, thanks for joining. See you in the next one.